Welcome back for another edition of Political Breakfast. And again, we're so proud and honored that we can come to you twice a week now. So much to talk about during this political season. Glad to be here again. I'm Lisa Rayam, and with me are Democratic strategist Tharon Johnson and Republican strategist Brian Robinson. How are the both of you?
Doing great.
You know, just trying to actually get through this then And again, you know, we talked about this on Tuesday. But just with all the things that are going on with the campaign season and then people fundraising, and I think that's the kind of segue where we're going to talk about today. But now folks are actually voting. And so I'm trying to really dictate like the enthusiasm, which about 2 weeks ago, Lisa, I thought apathy was at its all-time high. But I think people are actually kind of focusing more on these candidates and these races now as early voting has begun.
Yeah, we're, 3 days in. Started Monday. Early voting is currently underway. And I don't know, Brian, what is the appetite? Are people rushing to the polls to cast an early ballot or what? They're taking their time.
I think we're going to look back at the statistics on this week and see a very, very light turnout. There's not a lot that is really motivating people right now. Before we taped, I went and looked at my voter page just to see what was on my ballot, and I could see why there's such little enthusiasm. As y'all know, I'm a DeKalb resident, and there is a big CEO race here. And look, that's important to us. That's an office that directly impacts quality of life here in DeKalb County. We've had a great CEO with Mike Thurman, and whoever succeeds him is going to have big shoes to fill for sure. But I went and looked on my voter page, and I don't get to vote on the CEO. That decision is going to be made on the Democratic side of the split here. And so they get to choose the CEO. There is no Republican candidate for CEO. So I really won't have a vote on that at all. And I have a real problem with that. I think we need to, the delegation is to look at making that a nonpartisan position so that Republicans in DeKalb County will have a voice in how it turns out. And I think this could be good for everybody. We're not going to elect a Republican in DeKalb County. That's not possible. They don't have to worry about that. So they could see us as a bit of a moderating influence. So you keep sort of the fringy parts of the Democratic Party from winning a primary. It may be something good for the Democratic establishment because Republicans are probably going to vote for more of the Dem establishment folks than a fringy candidate. So I think it's something we need to look at because when it comes to what impacts me, I don't have a vote.
So B-Rob, I don't want to make sure I understand you correctly. So you're telling me that unless you go into the voting booth on May 21st or you go early vote this week, you have to check that you're voting in the Democratic primary. Like you can't just go as a DeKalb County resident and vote in this nonpartisan. Well, I guess it is partisan. I guess the CEO's race is partisan. Wow. Okay, so you have to pull a Democratic ballot to vote in that race. Now, what about the other races in the DeKalb County? You got judges' races and all that. So you can't vote on those races.
Yes,
right?
I can vote on. So I got a lot of judges. Okay. And so I got a lot of studying to do, right? I'm a fairly well-informed voter. Okay. And I got a lot of studying to do. I need to kind of go around and talk to some of the elected officials I know to see, who's a nut, who's going to be competent, right? Because I don't know a lot of these folks. Now, of course, we all get to vote on the Supreme Court and the appeals court races. I do know those guys, but I don't so much know the local judges and that kind of stuff. I'm going to have to educate myself. But I'll say on voting, one thing, Tharon and I were with Kathy Woolard, who's the head of the Fulton County Elections Board, chairman, and she was making the point that the ballots aren't traveling in the mail very fast because the mail sucks. So showing up and early voting may be a good idea for you if you are mobile. If you are not homebound, do not stress the system. Please go and early vote in person.
Almost mailed a package at USPS over the weekend, decided to go to UPS.
Yes, you did. Yeah. Same dilemma for me. I got to mail some master's paraphernalia out to friends in other states. And what do you do?
Take a chance. What are some of the races you all are watching closely?
Well, I'll kind of do a quick job of Fulton County, and then I think there's some other big races too. But let's just start with Fulton County for a second. So the big race that everyone is sort of looking at is the sheriff's race. 5 candidates in that race. The incumbent is Sheriff Pat Labat. who was elected 4 years ago and came right in and had some challenges that he was met with at the jail, and also, funding with the commission. I mean, he's running against 4 people. And so that race is underway, and I think there's going to be some upcoming debates this week and next week. So I think, people will be looking closely at that race. But I think most folks feel like they got to educate themselves on the roles and responsibility of the sheriff. And the sheriff's been very vocal about needing a new jail and needing funding for that, but also promoting some of the innovative things that he's been able to do. So, but he's got 4 challengers, and the question there is whether or not that will go to a runoff. The other race is the district attorney race, District Attorney Fani Willis, who we talk about Secretary Raffensperger being the most popular Secretary of State in the country. I definitely think that District Attorney Fani Willis is up there with him. And when you think about Georgia elected officials who've been in the spotlight lately, but it looks like she's running against Christian Y. Smith. Good guy, I met him a couple times. But other races, definitely Fulton County Clerk's race. Tina Robertson, who had been there for a while, decided to retire. So now you have Shay Alexander running against Keisha Waits, who's a former city council member. And that's the third person in that race. And then lastly, Lisa, because we don't have time to go through all of them, you got a bunch of judge races, but the one I think that is probably the most highlighted is Judge McAfee. Remind our listeners who was the judge who's been presiding over the Nathan Wade, District Attorney Fani Willis decision of what the Trump lawyers have pushed back about whether or not that trial should continue to move forward. But you got some other seats as well in the judges' races that are going on. Some Fulton County Commission races. We have 2 incumbents who are up for re-election. First, Commissioner Nally Hall, who's running against Mo Ivory. And then you also have Commissioner Khadijah Abdur Rahman, who's running against Ali Carter. And so I think there may be some other folks in those races, but those Fulton County Commission seats are also on the ballot this upcoming election. And then in Gwinnett and Cobb, you have Chairwoman Lisa Cupid, who's up for re-election in Cobb, and then you have Chairwoman Nicole Hendrickson, who's up for re-election in Gwinnett.
Voters have their homework cut out for them, if they want to take the time, and hopefully they do, to research the candidates. And Brian, you have a particular interest in the 3rd congressional district race as well, right?
That's right. The Democratic congressional races that we have in the 13th and in the 6th, with the 6th represented by Lucy McBath, the 13th by Congressman David Scott, they are pretty much, those deals are pretty sealed. Those incumbents are going to be in good shape going in. So we have one open seat, the 3rd. And for our listeners, that's the Southern Crescent District, essentially going from Fayette, Coweta down to Columbus, a little east toward Henry County. And so that's kind of the Southern Crescent Republican District. And it's being vacated by Drew Ferguson, who's been an excellent congressman. He is a big loss to the state. But we've got Brian Jack, who, by the way, used to be my intern when I worked for Congressman Westmoreland back in the aughts, and went on to be the political director for Donald Trump, and then went on to do political operation for Speaker Kevin McCarthy. He's come home to Peachtree City, where he is from, to run for this seat. He's in his mid-30s. He's taking on former State Senate Majority Leader Mike Dugan, who's got all of the conservative accomplishments that have been racked up through the Deal and Kemp administrations that he can take credit for when it comes to the heartbeat bill, when it comes to constitutional carry, tax cuts, economic development, you name it. There's a conservative victory behind it, and Dugan is really trying to wear that championship belt around his waist. So I think this is going to come down to the 2 of them, and it's a field where you have some more far right candidates. And for the far right guys, their lane has been filled by Brian Jack, because Jack has the Trump endorsement. And so you can't run to the right of somebody with the Trump endorsement. You kind of get this, this good housekeeping still of approval on you in the primary if Trump is behind you. So can Mike Dugan rally enough non-Trumpers, which isn't a big part of the primary, plus some folks who like Trump but don't follow his every word, perhaps are willing to think on, outside of what he recommends. So he's got to build that coalition. I know the Brian Jack team feels really confident about where they are in this election, where they're going to go up with TV ads, I'm sure, showing that clip of Trump in Rome endorsing Brian Jack. I think this would be a good test case. Is that Trump endorsement still super powerful in an open seat? We know Georgians will reject the Trump endorsement if he's going against one of our incumbents that we like and that we know and we trust. But in open seats, his endorsement has been decisive, and we'll see if that's the case down there.
And then real quick, because I know these congressional, just a reminder, you do have 2 incumbents who are running, but you got a lot of candidates who are running in that race as well. So too many to name, but I just want to make sure that our listeners know that both of those seats have a lot of people running in them, particularly the 13th, which is by Congressman David Scott's district.
Certainly a whole lot to look out for. Early voting ends May 17th, started April 29th. Okay, before we get out of here, Tharon, I think Brian celebrated another year this week.
I think so. Brian and I have been spending a lot of time together lately. We've been in Alabama and in Perry, Georgia. But he's a vibrant 40-plus-year-old. I don't know exactly how old he is. But no, B-Rob, happy birthday, man. Happy birthday. Yeah. And I hope you enjoyed it with your family.
Yeah.
I really appreciate that. And yes, Tharon, Lisa, the big one's coming up. Luckily, it's not this week, though.
Yeah. All right. I'm glad you're here.
Yes. We'll see if I make it.
All right, guys. Thanks a lot. And we'll do it again next week. Have a wonderful
Y'all
weekend.
Thank you, Lisa.